Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back with another episode of the award winning Hill Country Artist podcast. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have Matthew Fielder. Matthew, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us about your career in art and if it took other directions than art? What was that part of your story?
The career in art is pretty young right now, so I don't have too much to say about it. I've had a few commissions, sold a few pieces, but my interest when I was in my 20s was film, and I was still doing art a lot, and that was kind of informing what I wanted to do, what I wanted to make. But I eventually just kind of segued out of that and just followed art. It was always passion and something I was really good at, and so, yeah, but as far as a career goes, it's pretty young, so not too much to say about a career so much.
So, were you one of those kids who started drawing at age 5 and never quit? Did a teacher interest you? Did you have a crazy aunt who sent you to art class when you were in kindergarten? How did you start?
It was pretty much what you said, just I don't know, I guess I was just one of those kids that picked up crayons or markers or whatever I had at my disposal at the time and just started drawing. I remember being like 5 years old, and I loved The Wizard of Oz for whatever reason. Something about it fascinated me, and I was just draw the characters and city and stuff, and then just kinda kept at it. You couldn't stop me, and then eventually I discovered Star Wars. And I think that was really when it was like, "Okay, you can have a career designing robots and spaceships," and I discovered Ralph McQuarrie and Doug Chiang, Ian McCaig, and all the artists George Lucas worked with. So then it was like drawing robots and spaceships, and my love of science fiction kind of exploded. And yes, that I kind of more credit like Star Wars as my, beginnings of an interest in art, very nerdy beginnings.
What influenced me from The Wizard of Oz was those effing monkeys. I'm still
Oh,
afraid of
yeah.
monkeys. That speaks to my background and with The Wizard of Oz. But that Star Wars part is so cool because it worked on so many different creative levels, and you picked one, which was the art. But it could have been
Yeah.
the music, it could have been the story, it could have been the acting, it could have been the characters. But was it the colors? Was it the imagination? Was it all of the above? None of the above?
I definitely love the music. I mean, that was like my first CD of music I ever bought was the soundtrack to Gladiator by Hans Zimmer and Lisa Gerrard. So I was already a weirdo, just like listening to soundtrack music, and that comes from John Williams. And I love that. But I think why the art aspect of Star Wars stood out to me was it kind of, I guess, stirred something in me about design. You look at the Millennium Falcon, and it's such a now it's iconic. It was, I think, probably immediately iconic, but it was such a new, kind of different, familiar but different, but had that like kind of grungy industrial look, and it was asymmetrical. The cockpit wasn't just like in the middle; it was like kind of off to one side. So there was, and it had little quirks and little new different things, and it was and then you see that with all the other designs that Ralph McQuarrie did. There was another production designer that I think originally did the artwork before McQuarrie. I can't remember his name, but and even the Star Destroyers, all these very simple, immediately iconic shapes. Way that the design language just aided the storytelling. I mean, as soon as you see a Star Destroyer, you're like, "Wow, they're the bad guys. They have all the power and the might." It is this giant spearhead, basically hurtling through space. So I think it was probably what stirred a fascination to me was just the design more than anything, not the colors so much. It was the way the design was like aiding the story. I think.
So what was your work in the movie industry then around art?
Never quite segued into the any kind of movie industry. I'm from Southeast Texas. I'm from a little town near Beaumont, Texas, and so I went to a school called Lamar University, and I knew I wanted to study film, and they had it in their communications department. So I started studying films, making short student films. Met an awesome group of friends that I still stay in touch with to this day, and we kind of helped each other learn a lot about movies as much as we learned through school, but on the projects that we were working on together, there was actually a Star Wars documentary that my really good friend Bradley Weatherholt directed that I think you rent on Amazon still right now. You can stream it. It's called The Prequel Strike Back. And my role in there, I did like behind the scenes B-roll kind of stuff, but I largely my work was artistic. There's an animated sequence in it that I didn't animate, but I provided like the backgrounds, the artwork for it. And I did the poster art. I think the thumbnail image on an Amazon, when you find it, is my poster that I made, my artworks. Largely the work that I did do, even when it was a short film I made, and I only made couple, but it was all very much art and it visually oriented, maybe not art oriented so much, but visually oriented. It was kind of a thing that you learn filmmaking 101. It's more about what you can do with the images than what you can do with dialogue. But yeah, I think art was always something I couldn't get away from, even making short films.
I really like that phrase visual images because I think that really encapsulates so much more than simply saying a movie or simply saying a film or simply saying art. How did you evolve to sort of your current type of art, if I can phrase it like that?
Yeah, that I mean, I think evolution's the perfect word. It was just kind of segueing out of narrative interest, like how to make art that drives narratives. It then became how to make art that just is like stimulating, visually stimulating, like just how to make beautiful images. They don't have to tell stories so much. They just have to be like evocative, I guess. And right now, my current style that I'm really focusing on and honing is pastels. And I always loved landscapes. I think maybe more so than figurative work, but I do love figurative work. Obviously, some great stuff. But I always loved landscapes. I love traveling. I love hiking. I love being in nature. The world is beautiful, and I think it's a thing too, like, even going back to Star Wars, all these big planets, these landscapes, these crazy alien vistas, and our planet is full of all those crazy alien vistas, forests, deserts, mountains, yeah, I guess kinda want my art to be transportative, and to part of that is the mood, the feeling, but yeah, I discovered pastel. I discovered Albert Handel in particular. He was like my first kind of light bulb going off. Wow, pastel is beautiful. I know there's been a lot of pastels before him historically, but just in terms of his landscapes, they were really just powerful. And that was kind of just got rolling after that. I was like, that's a good way to get into color without worrying about all the intricacies of oil. Working with oils. I do want to work with oils and I will get around to it. But right now I'm just deep into pastels. So it's kind of where I'm at right now in my evolution.
So, in terms of the landscapes that you have worked on or are working on, are they from the part of the world you live in now?
Yeah, some of them are Texas hill country landscapes. I think we think of the hills and the blue bonnets, and there's an artist, Julian Onderdonk, who I think was kind of like true father of Texas hill country landscapes. If you think of like a scene with a live oak and a little dirt road path and some blue bonnets in the summertime, pretty much that pretty much stems from Onderdonk in their gorgeous images. Yeah, some of them are from the area, and then quite a few of them have been New Mexico. My partner and I, we love to take trips in the summertime when it gets really hot here, and we go to northern New Mexico to the Rocky Mountains, and just so love the mountains. They're so inspirational. So everywhere you look, so that's a painting, that's a painting, and so yeah, there's actually been a few of them that have been New Mexico pieces. So it's kind of just if it hits me and I can study it, take a photo of it, and turn it into a piece, then I will.
And that really leads, and you may have actually started to answer this, your creative process. So do you see it in your mind's eye? You mentioned taking a picture of it. Does it an image just pop into your head? You also mentioned looking at the mountains and seeing the painting. Could you maybe share that with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it kind of depends on whatever the piece is going to be. I do actually sometimes do science fiction stuff. I'm working on one right now. Maybe you can kind of see it behind me. But when it's something like that, it really is like an image in my head that is just start sketching and figuring it out. And even looking at photo references, big parts of the world that have a particular landscape that maybe this is drawing from or something. But so if it's something like that's really imaginative, then yeah, do whatever I can to get it out of my head and to start making the piece happen. But when it's more traditional pastel landscapes, It's like in the moment, it's if I'm out, yeah, I'll have to take a picture of it. I don't have a plein air setup right now. That's something I need to get going. I really want to do plein air, but for right now, it's yeah, take a photo and then start kind of figuring out, is there a composition within that photo? Can I crop in on it to find a better composition? Was there something, and then figure out what is it about that moment that struck me? Is it something about the light, the shadow, particular detail, and then start doing anything, cropping in on it, like I said, and even do notans, figuring out the values and how to like then basically take the photo and start interpreting it into, because one thing that I can do that's kind of a hindrance sometimes is I can be really beholden to the reference, and it can turn into this thing. I've got to try to make it look like that moment, like the photo, like reality. And funny because it's like all the pieces that I like, they're not photographic necessarily. They have something else about them. They're maybe even a little, what I'm looking for, interpretive, or they're not purely photographic. They're not like so hyper detailed. And yet that's something I'm for some reason trying to attain. It's been a learning process. Like, don't be beholden to the photo reference, even change some things about it. You know, if there's something that is not working for the composition or drawing your eyes somewhere else. So it's, I guess in terms of a process, it's all about what is the subject? What is my goal with it? And then what work do I need to do to get it there, get it to where I want it to be. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's awesome.
So I live north of Kerrville off
Mhm.
the Harper Road in Tierra
Yeah.
Linda, and we moved here in November. So as we came out of winter and into spring, I began to notice not the change that we would see in nature, but the different colors of green.
Mhm.
And one of your predecessors on this podcast says, that's because you've been talking to us. And you're now seeing 18 different shades of green in just driving through the part of the hill country we live in. And this year's, we've maybe not completely come out of our drought, but in large part have. And as
Yeah.
I tell people, in August was the greenest I had ever seen any part of Texas.
Yeah.
And so do you see those layers of green? Do you see the colors when you look at a landscape? Do you really see it through that artist eye?
Yeah, I probably can't help but to see it. My all right. Can you hear me now? I think I lost connection.
You did.
Yeah. I'm out in the
Yeah,
country,
you
so the internet's really is shaky.
no worries. But you ended by saying, "I can't help it. That's just the way I see."
Well, yeah, Holly, the owner of the Hill Country Atelier, where I'm a student, one thing she and I have talked about with me is that I've got this really strong lens that I've developed that allows me to be really hypersensitive to detail. And sometimes that means I get really myopic and I can let the detail lead me astray and it becomes all about the detail. And I forget where I was going, but it can also really help me see, to be sensitive to like those variations. And so, yeah, when you're working with pastel, to a degree, you can do a little bit of mixing with the finger. You can kind of mix the dust around together and stuff. But more often than not, you're kind of beholden to whatever pigment is in the stick of pastel that you're using at the time. And yeah, when I'm working, I definitely am trying to see, is this a cool green? Is it a little warmer green? Is there a little more yellow in it? Is it a little brown? And yeah, like you said, there's so many. I mean, looking out the window right now, oh man, it's more than just green. And even color relationships. How is this going to look, up against another color? The other day I was working on this peak behind me and I put a little bit of a kind of a light lavender color. Can't remember, it's against the sky. Maybe I can't remember where I put it, but it immediately looked gray. I was like, oh, that's not what I wanted. That's wrong. But yeah, I think something also that I love is whenever, I don't know if there's a term where I call it color vibration. I love it when it is more than just one color happening. They're like existing in the same value range, but you can even see like purple, in grass. Sometimes it's not because of a flower. You're staying in a value range and you're using different colors to kind of create this fluctuation, this vibration of color that just, I don't know what it does. It just brings it to life. It kind of, it makes it feel like it's happening, like it's moving, it's active and animated right there in front of you, I guess. But yeah, definitely. I try to be sensitive to those things and not just say, it's green, use one color of green, let's say.
So I'd like to move over to the Texas Hill Country Atelier and
Yeah.
ask you about your experience there. How did you first become aware of it, and what has been your role?
I lived in Austin for about 7 years of my life, from 14 to whenever I met my partner in 2018, and then moved in with them in like 2021. It was just shortly before COVID, or around the time of COVID, I think was when it was. But while I was in Austin, there was actually a place called the Atelier Dojo. And I'd learned about Atelier shortly before then, I think through social media, actually. And I'd learned about the Watts Atelier in Los Angeles, and the arts that coming out of there. Their students are producing brilliant work, and the teachers that they're bringing on are brilliant. And it is figurative. It's not landscape work, it's figurative work. But I looked into it and I realized it was this whole kind of tradition of art education that's, it boomed at one point and then we've kind of fallen away from it. And it's kind of starting to emerge again. I think more so on the east and west coasts, not so much kind of here in the middle, but yeah, it's happening as is evident here in Kerrville. But then I moved out here and I just Googled, like, I knew there was an art scene out here. I knew that there were plenty of artists in the Hill Country. How could there not be? It's beautiful. And so I just Googled to see if maybe there was one nearby, or if maybe I could make trips back to Austin occasionally. And sure enough, there was the Holly's Atelier, the Hill Country Atelier out here. And I was scared to sign up at first. I'm kind of a shy person. And because I saw her work and it's so good. It is really good. And I'm like, okay, I'm incredibly intimidated right now. And so I inquired about it and then didn't do it for a full year. And then fall rolled back around a couple of years ago. I'm like, I'm going to do it. And so that was kind of the start of that journey. And man, it has been so incredibly valuable. I've learned, I've learned so much. I don't even know what I've learned. I can't even talk about what I've learned, but it's been a really eye-opening education that has helped my landscapes, as oddly enough, even though we're so heavily focused on the figure, the human figure. Yeah, you're learning so much about how to realize that subject, that even whenever I'm approaching my landscapes, when I'm working on those, I can't help but utilize those tools.
Could you sort of take us through the process? You hinted at that, but I know it's a full process. Could you take us at least through the part you've gone through?
Good. Oh, so I'm kind of at the end of there's three, I guess you could call them partitions of the curriculum at the atelier. There's drawing, and these each could take a year, but it's okay if they take longer, and it's probably good that they do. So there's drawing, there's grisaille, which is grayscale oil painting. So that's the first segue into oil painting. And then the third and final part of the curriculum is like full color oil painting. And there's various milestone projects within each part of the curriculum that you have to achieve in order to move on. I'm currently working on my final drawing project. It's like a master graphite rendering. And you have to do various things in order to get to that point. So this is the last project that stands between me and stepping into oil. And really in terms of a process, I mean, there's multiple processes and it always depends on the subject. And we sometimes have different focuses. By and large, it's the human figure is what we were focusing on. Every Wednesday and Fridays now we do live drawing. So it's literally like in a movie when you see like students in arts in the early 1900s, they're all around a, a model, a nude model on a stage, and they've all got their easels. Like literally that. So we're studying the human form, and there's so much to learn about that, how to make that happen, how to see. And I think that's probably what we have to pinpoint something. That's what we're really after. That's kind of the real goal, is to learn how to see. And we all know how to see. I mean, we can't help but do it all the time. But there are aspects of seeing and knowing what you're seeing that we take for granted, that we don't utilize, that we're not consciously activating. They're just sort of subconsciously active while we're awake and doing our thing. And what Holly teaches at the atelier. And what's kind of unique about this atelier, she teaches what's called the multi-lens perspective. And so there are many different ways of viewing a subject and many different ways there of approaching a subject. You have to, while you're working, switch these different lenses. This lens was useful while you were doing the block in, but now you got to put that aside and you got to start looking at this and maybe go back and forth. And yeah, it's all about learning how to see and how to consciously, actively engage in seeing, knowing what you're looking at, and of course, how to like then put pencil to paper and really make it happen.
So how would you assess, or actually maybe not assess is not the right word. What would you say to someone who's considering going through this process?
Hmm. What to say to someone who's considering it? I guess I'd say don't be scared to go for it. The Hill Country Atelier in particular is a part-time atelier. It's not it doesn't it's demanding, but it's not as demanding as say going to I'm sure the Watts Atelier where it's full time and it's you gotta do your work full time, you gotta be here full time and the rest of your life you have to figure it out, how to support it. This at least is it's part time. And that will mean that you end up putting a little more time into it. But it also means you can kind of um maybe go at it a little more at your own pace. Maybe still have a little bit of a life to support it to make it happen. So certainly, I would say don't be afraid to go for it. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't get in your own head about pressing anyone, even yourself. It is strictly a learning environment and it's so liberating to being around other artists. You feel safe. It's a safe space, really, at the atelier. It's a place to just do art, be around like minded people with the same interests. We're all there to do art. We're all there to learn. Holly's an incredible teacher, so kind. And so she's so willing to work with you at your own pace and to understand, what are your strengths and to help you work on your strengths. And that's something else, too, is like, you're not going to get this experience where it's like you do something wrong and then throw the whole canvas out the window or something like it's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be whatever you came into the atelier with. We all develop strengths over our lives. And whatever that strength is that you bring into the atelier, it's not going to be like an unlearn it situation. Forget about it. Forget everything you've learned. It's all garbage. This is the way to learn. No, it's okay. You've got that. You've developed that. That's useful. How can it not be useful? But here's also some other tools that you can employ and even to help augment tools that you brought with you. So I would say there's no reason to go for it, especially if you're passionate about it. We're only here for a short time, so follow your dream, basically, is what I would say, if you can.
Matthew, what's next for you, or do you have any upcoming shows? You've mentioned perhaps going into oil. Sort of what's the next step for Matthew?
Actually, right now, so there was the Fertile Grounds juried show at the Hill Country Arts Foundation out there in Ingram. And I got second place in that show. And I got three of my pastels that are up there right now. So that was my first show in a very long time that I've been a part of. That took a lot of courage on my part to do. I'm sure if left to my own devices, I'd just sit in here like a recluse and just make art and never go anywhere with it. So I've done that recently, and now those pieces will be up there until September 20th, I think is when the show switches out to whatever's next for them. And then as far as what's next for me, I just got to make more pastels. I got to make more landscapes. And I am kind of getting back into I've always loved science fiction. That's not going to go away. I'm always reading it. I'm always watching movies and stuff. But I am getting back into probably that childlike inspiration that started everything for me. And in addition to my more traditional pastel landscapes, I'm also exploring like doing sci-fi landscapes and what that could be. And I've got a lot of ideas and a lot of things that come into my mind. And so I'll probably be doing a little bit of both, kind of switching back and forth. And I don't have any other shows planned right now, but maybe when I do, it'll be kind of a combination of pastel, sci-fi, pastel landscape, and who knows, maybe even a little bit of oil and wash. Actually, I love wash. I need to do more of that. It might be kind of a mix of things.
Matthew, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, if our listeners wanted more information on you or to maybe find out more about your work, where might be the best place or places for them to go?
I would say my Instagram is probably the best place. I do have a portfolio website, but that is a little more to do with some of the book cover work that I've done to make a living. So as far as my personal work, pastel work, my Instagram would be the best place. And I believe my tag or my name on there is just Matthew underscore Todd underscore Fielder art. I believe something like that. It'll be a photo of me with a black cat on the shoulder. And as far as the Hill Country Atelier goes, I believe the website address is hillcountryatelier.org. But if you Google text Hill Country Atelier, it'll be the first thing that comes up, I'm sure. So,
Matthew, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
yeah, thanks, Tom. We'll do. Thanks for having me.